Mystery behind each door, footsteps echo on the floor. Pieces fit but don't make sense, chilling facts leave us tense. Crime time, here we go. Stories that the night unfolds. Truth is stranger than they show. In the silence it grows cold.
Criminal and Crimson Crime.
Welcome back to another installment of Criminal and Crimson. This time we delve into a case from America. I've been trying to do a lot of British cases because they're perhaps less known worldwide and less overdone, you know what I mean? But I recently heard about this case and it's quite a interesting one, and I decided I had to do a video on it. It's a case that changed the lives of an unexpected community and sort of emphasize how vulnerable we are even in very public places full of people. It's a case from 1984 in San Ysidro. In 1984, it actually takes place primarily in a McDonald's. So it's known as the 1984 McDonald's Massacre. In case you don't know, San Ysidro is in California in the US. It was a hot July day and it takes place in a suburb just a mile away from the border. Now, when we go about in public doing things like shopping and stuff like that, we don't really expect much to happen, do we? You know, you pop into McDonald's and get a little lunch or whatever it is, dinner, whatever. You don't really expect anything to happen to you in there. You know, the most you might think is something natural. You know, I don't know, you have some sort of medical emergency, or somebody else does, or I don't know, that's about it really. You know, you don't really expect anything serious to happen to you when you just pop into McDonald's, let's face it. But this day, for this small little quiet community, turned into an absolute horror movie. James Oliver Herberti, I hope I'm saying that right, was a 41-year-old former welder. He had recently had financial trouble. He had moved around a few places. I believe he'd even moved to Tijuana, and he'd come back, moved into this little suburb here, and he was having a lot of financial trouble. Just a few minutes before 4 p.m. on the 18th of July 1984, he walked into McDonald's, a bag slung over his shoulder containing a semi-automatic pistol, a shotgun, and even an Uzi.
From the south, and the CP is at 300 west. The shooting suspect is inside the McDonald's. He is contained, moving around in there. Still shots being fired.
He entered the facility heavily armed, immediately started shooting everybody. And the customers that were inside the restaurant had absolutely no chance to escape.
He opened fire on the unexpected employees and customers of the McDonald's with the Uzi. He had 40 people trapped in there, and that isn't all. He also shot people approaching the restaurant, including children on bicycles, an elderly couple, and he held the place basically hostage, just picking people off for a whole 77 minutes. So basically you could watch pretty much a whole movie in that time, nearly. You know, these things are normally sorted out pretty quick. You know, you got a gunman blasting up a place like that. These things, you know, pretty quickly resolved. 77 long minutes this went on. Police did show up. They didn't take any shots. The SWAT team, the Special Weapons and Tactics SWAT, was called. They were at some sort of conference, or a rumor is they're at a party, and they either, according to them, their pager, their buzzer thing, didn't work, it didn't go off, or if they're at a party, did they not see it, whatever the case, that caused a 30-minute delay because they didn't get notified immediately. It took 30 minutes before they noticed and actually started responding. Then they were dispatched to the wrong McDonald's. Yeah. So This isn't even funny. It's sort of kind of funny because it's so ridiculous. But yeah, they're even sent to the wrong McDonald's. So that caused a delay, which they claim was only maybe about 2 minutes. But so you have this huge delay in the SWAT getting there. Once they're there, they claim they couldn't take a shot because the guy had been shooting up everywhere and all the windows were like broken. And the way the McDonald's windows were made, they were kind of like shatterproof. So instead of like if you got hit or shot, instead of like shattering into pieces that could easily cut people, it was made so it kind of like had a spidery effect, like a spider web. It didn't actually shatter. And so the police claim because of all this spider web effect within the glass, they couldn't actually see in. However, this is disputed by multiple sources. So you have the fact that people there, the crowd surrounding, watching, reporters say at least certain angles you could see in, and there is a police video you can see, which you can actually watch in the documentary called 77 Minutes, which I believe is on Amazon Prime at the moment. You can actually see the police take a camcorder in and they record the scene with the body still laying there. And at least from the inside, you can certainly see out pretty well. And from the footage outside as well, from the reporters, it looks like you can see in, at least in some angles, pretty well. The other excuse they make is, oh wait, the sun was bright. The sun was shining on the window. Well, the sun doesn't shine brightly on the window, in all directions of the building, does it? It doesn't have a 360-degree perfect shine on all sides. So that kind of, I'm not sure, really adds up. It took until one of the snipers on the roof of the post office next door saw him move in front of the front door. And in front of the front door, all the glass had actually gone. And he decided this was enough. He took it off his own back to go, no, this is enough. This can't go on any longer. And he actually took the shot off his own accord, I believe.
These images are more of war than of a small fast food restaurant in San Ysidro. Yet it was a local man dressed in battle fatigues who declared, I have killed 1,000, I'm gonna kill 1,000 more. 41-year-old James Huberty reportedly walked into the restaurant carrying a semi-automatic rifle and 2 other weapons, enough ammunition to last 2 hours. Witnesses inside said he fired wildly into the unsuspecting crowd gathered for a quick evening meal. He fired through windows, hitting people in the street. He fired at men, women, children, and babies.
77 minutes. And it was finally over with 21 people left dead and another 19 badly injured. Both men, women, children, and yes, even babies were left dead. He even shot a baby. Now, if you watch the documentary 77 minutes later, I will actually give you a warning. They show the bodies, which I don't mind, but bear in mind, not only do they show the bodies of the adults, they even show the little baby laying on the floor shot and dead. So just bear that in mind. It's a pretty bad case, this one, and the footage is pretty extreme. The questions then, of course, arose of, was this racist? Because it happened in a largely Mexican area, and most of the victims were Mexican, but I need to emphasize, not all. There were white victims as well. And so, since the gunman was white, and it was a mostly white McDonald's, it is said that, oh my god, it's racist. And if you watch the 77 minutes documentary, the filmmaker, the director, tries baiting people in interviews with, well, people say this was racially motivated. What do you think? And he tries to get everybody to say yes, 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 yes. Nobody does, and I'll explain why. The reason is, yes, he's a white guy. This was mostly a Mexican area, mostly Mexican customers, but you have to bear a couple things in mind. One, he'd previously moved to Tijuana. If you're some hardcore Nazi that hates Mexicans, you don't move to Tijuana. I know, that's just common sense. He had moved right into the middle of a Mexican area, surrounded by Mexican neighbors, Again, something you're unlikely to do. Basically, this McDonald's was down the road from him, just basically a few steps away. That is a large part of why this particular restaurant was the target. And there's perhaps a little bit more to it. That day, he had been to another area, which, yes, was whiter, which you see why people say, well, why didn't he target this place? Just bear with me. He'd gone to this other place where he had a court hearing with a judge because of a parking fine. Now, you could say this triggered him, but no, it actually went really well. He had the judge dismiss the parking ticket, so awesome, great. So what went wrong? He went across the road from the courthouse with his wife and child or children, I can't remember how many he had, and he went to McDonald's. It is alleged by his wife he had a terrible meal there, and that seemed because he obviously was suffering mentally anyway. There's clearly stuff brewing for a while here, and I think that just set him off for the day. That seemed to trigger him. They left, they went to a zoo on the way back, and he seemed to be in basically a bad mood then. He made references to how humanity's had its chance anyway. Weird little comments like that, which his wife thought was a little odd. They then went home. He went in his home, gathered up his guns, which I don't think his wife knew that's what he was doing, but he gathered up his guns and left. And that is when he went down the road from his apartment or whatever it was, his home, and did what he did. Now, the filmmaker says, well, this other area was whiter. If he wasn't racist, why didn't he target that McDonald's? Did he have his gun with him in the car? No. He wasn't planning to do that. If he had planned to do that, he would have had his guns in a bag in like the boot of his car. He didn't. That wasn't what he set out to do initially. He set out to go with his family to get his court hearing done, get rid of this ticket if he could, and then maybe have a little meal at McDonald's and come home. He hadn't even been planning to go to the zoo. That was a spur of the moment thing. His wife and child wanted to go to the zoo and they dropped in. That hadn't even been planned. So the filmmaker says, well, why didn't he shoot that McDonald's up, especially if he had a bad meal there? Why didn't he shoot the zoo up? He didn't have his guns with him. Yes, that other McDonald's had been the one to wrong him in a way. It had been the one to give him the bad meal, allegedly. And it had been the one, and it had been a white area. But this wasn't about it being a white area. It wasn't about the fact he had a bad meal there or whatever, because he didn't have his guns. So basically it set him off. He got mad at probably McDonald's. He got mad at humanity, as he put it, at the zoo. He got mad with everybody. He got in a bad frame of mind, bad mental ill health. Then once he got home, he had access to his guns. He would have been aware, oh, there's a McDonald's down the road, I can just walk there. And another trouble is, because it's only a few steps basically down the road, you don't have the time to cool off. Sometimes if you get mad with something, if you say you were wanting to, I don't know, mad with McDonald's, by the time you walked down to that McDonald's, say with all your Uzis and whatever he had, you would perhaps, by the time you got there, cool off. You're like, oh, God, this is stupid, I can't do this. And you'd either cool off or even chicken out and go home. And I'm sure it's happened to many people. I'm sure there's a lot of people who've had access to guns and stuff in America and things like that, and they've nearly done something crazy, but they've cooled off first. The trouble was this: he had a McDonald's and he was mad at McDonald's, allegedly, because of that bad meal. He had one right within this short distance, so he grabbed his weapons, and by the time he got there, he hadn't cooled off. He was too close. He hadn't had time to chicken out or calm down. I think that's a big part of it. Yeah, but basically, yes, most of the victims were Mexican. Yes, he didn't shoot up the more white McDonald's he'd been at that gave him the bad meal. But don't you think if he had the guns, he would have done that other one? Because it had wronged him, not this other place. It was purely because he didn't have his weapons. That's the only reason the people at that other place survived and got really lucky that day. It was purely chance. It had nothing to do with race. And in fact, in that documentary, there is even a Mexican guy who doesn't speak English, and it has to be translated with subtitles. This Mexican guy actually was asked what he thought, and he said the same thing. It wasn't about race. He was just a mentally ill guy. Now let's go a little bit more into his background here. I've got a bit of it written down here. He was born in Ohio in 1942. He grew up in a troubled household. Early on, he displayed behavioural issues, so he'd always had a bit of behavioural issues, maybe even wasn't quite, mentally all there, let's say. Anyway, as he got older, he actually described himself as a man increasingly haunted by anger, paranoia, and a sense of hopelessness. In fact, talking about mental illness, this is something that really needs to be mentioned. I'm nearly forgetting here. That day, he obviously knew he wasn't coping well. And guess what? He phoned the doctors. They told him they'd call back in basically a few minutes. Guess what? Can you guess? They never phoned back. He tried to get help. This is what happens. This is a frustrating thing about mental illness and stuff. When these people end up killing and that, do these things, you hear, this isn't the only time I've heard, they have tried to get in contact with somebody to do with mental health, like a doctor, a psychiatrist, and they get these problems. They can't get hold of them. They get told they'll get called back, and it never happens. If people, these people perhaps could actually get through to somebody, maybe some of these disasters, maybe this would have been prevented. If he had got that call back, who knows, maybe this would never have happened. It's not just America, that either. The amount of times, like, my family and I, have had like doctor's appointments, they're going to call you. Then about 5 minutes before the call is meant to happen, you get a notification in a text message, your appointment has been cancelled. Yeah, so that day he had tried to call a mental health clinic. He tried to call a mental health clinic. He had even said to his wife that day that he believes there's something wrong with him, which, clearly there was, and he knew it, and he tried to get help. I would say there's multiple morals to this story. One, I'd say if you really think there's something seriously wrong to the point of you got to endanger somebody, get help. But in this guy's defense, he tried to get help. He had untreated mental illnesses. They hadn't been treated, and a lot of his problems went back many, many years, and it was still untreated. The day it happened, he tried to call, basically, I think he knew he's got to end up doing something that day, and he called trying to get something done about himself quickly, and it didn't happen. So I would say the moral of the story is to, if you think something drastic going to happen either to yourself or to somebody else, get help. But then look what happens when people try to get help. So I think perhaps the other moral of the story is, well, if you work in that kind of business, if you want, if you work in that kind of field, if somebody calls for mental health issues or whatever, and you say you've got to call them back, make sure you make a note of that. Make sure you actually follow through. Do it, because you don't know what might happen if you don't. So yeah, I thought that was a very interesting case, especially the mental illness side of it. Also the mental health versus racism side of it. How some people assume racism, basically they, in a way, they see racism everywhere they look, when that isn't necessarily the case. And I think it's a very intriguing story about mental health and basically getting it treated and doing your job properly. If you work in mental health field, take it seriously, give people callbacks, help them, because you don't know what might happen. So thanks for watching this episode of Criminal and Crimson. Stay tuned for another episode soon. And if you like this, please like, comment, subscribe, follow. And until next time, stay curious.